By the time you finish this story, you'll be asleep. Close your eyes. Take one slow breath in. And let whatever the day put into you, every worry, every task, every small frustration you've been carrying since morning, let all of it begin to settle. You don't have to fix anything tonight. You don't have to be ready for anything. Tonight, there is only this: the sound of a voice, the soft weight of the dark, and a story that begins 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Breathe out and let your imagination travel there. It is somewhere in the middle of a very long night. Below, the ocean is invisible. No lights, no landmarks, just an unbroken darkness that goes on for thousands of miles. The stars above the aircraft are extraordinarily bright at this altitude, cleaner and steadier than any you could see from the ground, and if you were awake to look at them, they would be beautiful. But inside the cockpit, two pilots are fighting the oldest enemy a person can face at 30,000 feet. Not weather, not mechanical failure, not any of the dramatic crises that fill the films about aviation. Just sleep. Just the slow, irresistible weight of a human body that has been awake for too many hours, doing too much careful work, in the humming, pressurized, subtly narcotic atmosphere of a long-haul cockpit. The instruments glow their soft colors. The autopilot holds the plane true. And the brain, which has been managing checklists and communications and 1,000 small decisions of a trans-Pacific crossing, begins to slow. Begins, in the language of the scientists who would later study this, to produce micro-sleeps. Tiny losses of consciousness lasting just a second or two, invisible to the pilot experiencing them, but showing up clearly on the EEG sensors attached to his scalp. He doesn't know he's doing it. That's the part that kept the researchers awake at night. You've probably seen the headline. It shows up on productivity blogs, in newspaper columns, in late-night Reddit threads about sleep science. NASA found the perfect nap. 26 minutes. That's the number. A nap of exactly 26 minutes will improve your performance by 34% and your alertness by 54%. Any longer and you drop into deep REM sleep, and your brain thinks it's nighttime, and you wake up feeling terrible and unable to sleep when you actually need to. You've probably nodded at that and moved on, half believing it. Here's what's interesting. Almost everything in that headline is wrong. Not completely wrong. There's a real study with real pilots and real numbers and real science. But the way the story got told and retold and compressed into a shareable fact quietly changed almost every important detail. And the true story, the actual story of what happened on those trans-Pacific flights, what the researchers really found, what your brain is actually doing when it crosses the line between a good nap and a bad one. That story is more interesting, more human, more worth carrying into sleep. So let your body settle into where it rests. Let your breath slow to something easy and automatic. And let's begin at the beginning. The number 26 has a satisfying quality to it. It's specific enough to feel scientific. It's short enough to be memorable. It sounds like something a laboratory produced. Not 25, not 30, but 26. As though a team of researchers in white coats ran the experiment and the data came back, and the answer was exactly 26 minutes, precise to the unit, the way the boiling point of water is exactly 100 degrees. But that's not quite how it happened. The study was real. It was conducted in the early 1990s, led by a researcher named Mark Rosekind at NASA's Ames Research Center in Moffett Field, California, a low-slung complex of buildings near the southern end of San Francisco Bay, where NASA's Human Factors Division had been quietly studying the physiology of flight crews for years. Rosekind and his team were not looking for the perfect nap in any general sense. They were looking for something much more specific, whether a planned, scheduled rest period during the quiet cruise phase of a long-haul trans-Pacific flight could measurably reduce the risk of pilot fatigue in the final, most demanding phase of the journey, the descent and landing. This was not an abstract question. Fatigue-related incidents in commercial aviation had been building as a quiet concern in the safety literature for years. The routes were getting longer, the aircraft were getting more capable of flying those routes without stopping, and the human beings flying them were still running on the same neurological hardware they'd always had. Hardware that did not benefit from autopilot, that could not simply be switched to a maintenance mode during the long, low workload hours of an oceanic crossing. Rosekind's team studied 21 long-haul flight crews on real commercial trans-Pacific routes, real flights, not simulations, real planes carrying real passengers crossing a real ocean. 12 crews were given what the study called a planned rest opportunity during the cruise phase. The other 9 crews were the control group. They received no planned rest and simply managed the flight the conventional way. The planned rest opportunity was 40 minutes long, not 26, 40. The pilots in the rest group were given 40 minutes during which a qualified colleague covered their duties, and they were permitted to recline and sleep if they could. And what the researchers found when they analyzed the EEG data and the performance metrics collected throughout those flights was that the average actual sleep achieved within that 40-minute window was 25 minutes and 35 seconds. Rounded up, that becomes 26 minutes. Not a target, not a prescribed duration, not the output of a mathematical model determining the optimal nap length. Just the average amount of sleep that pilots, lying in a cockpit seat in a pressurized cabin on an operational flight, managed to get when given 40 minutes of opportunity. The number is real. The story of how it became the number is more complicated. What Rosekind's team actually reported was this. Compared to the control group, the rested pilots showed a 34% improvement in performance scores and a 54% improvement in alertness measures, particularly in the final 90 minutes of the flight, the approach and landing phase, the period of highest cognitive demand, the window in which a tired pilot's degraded judgment was most likely to matter. The improvement was genuine. The finding was significant. It changed the way aviation safety researchers thought about fatigue management and eventually influenced cockpit rest regulations around the world. But the number 26, extracted from its context and presented as the scientifically determined perfect nap length, quietly shed the things that made it meaningful. The 40-minute opportunity, the operational setting, the specific population of trained pilots, the particular phase of flight they were addressing. It became a productivity tip, a life hack, a number you could put in a headline. Numbers do that. They travel light. They leave the weight of their context behind. let your breath become a little slower now. The second myth about the NASA nap study is the one about resources. The idea that NASA poured vast sums of money into a dedicated program to determine the mathematically perfect nap length, that somewhere in the Ames Research Center there was a sleep laboratory with special beds and teams of scientists running subjects through carefully controlled nap experiments, and that this enormous institutional investment eventually produced the number. The truth is more interesting because it is more human. Rosekind's team was small. The study was observational. They went out to the cockpits of real aircraft on real flights and instrumented real pilots with EEG sensors and actigraphy devices and performance testing equipment, and they collected data in the actual operational environment where the fatigue problem lived. This was not a laboratory study. It was field research, which is both harder and more meaningful than controlled laboratory research for the purposes it was serving. The researchers had to negotiate with airlines. They had to get regulatory approval to conduct research on operating commercial flights. They had to design tests that pilots could actually take in a cockpit. Cognitive tasks that were sensitive enough to detect fatigue-related degradation, but brief enough to administer without disrupting the work of flying. They had to convince pilots, who are not by nature enthusiastic about having their neurological performance measured while doing their jobs, to wear EEG sensors on their heads during trans-Pacific crossings. All of that is genuinely difficult work, but it is the work of a dedicated research team doing careful science on a safety-critical problem, not a moonshot, not a Manhattan project for napping. Just researchers doing what researchers do in the particular unglamorous way that good field research actually gets done. Mark Rosekind was 35 years old when the study was published. He had spent most of his career studying pilot fatigue, which is not the kind of specialization that generates headlines or makes you famous at academic conferences. It is the kind of specialization you pursue because you think the problem is real and important and not getting enough attention. He was right about that. The study he led cost far less than the mythology suggests and produced far more than the mythology captures, because what Rosekind and his team actually built was not just a finding about nap length. They built a methodology, a way of studying fatigue in operational aviation settings that influenced every subsequent generation of research in the field. They demonstrated that you could instrument real flight crews on real aircraft and collect meaningful physiological data without compromising safety. That this kind of research was possible, that it was necessary. Those are the things that tend to get lost when a number goes viral. The number is the artifact. The science is the thing that made the number possible. And the science, in this case, was built quietly by a small team on the actual aircraft of a working airline over several years for reasons that had nothing to do with productivity optimization and everything to do with keeping people alive. This is the one that the sleep scientists most want to correct. The popular version of the NASA nap story includes a warning: go longer than 26 minutes and you drop into REM sleep. And REM sleep is where the danger lives. Your brain mistakes the nap for nighttime, you wake up confused and groggy and unable to sleep properly later. It's a vivid image, and it's wrong in almost every particular. To understand why, you need to know something about how your brain actually moves through sleep. Not the textbook version with its neat numbered stages, just the physical reality of what your brain is doing in the minutes and hours after you close your eyes. Sleep is not a single state. It is a journey through a series of states, cycling through them repeatedly across the night in a pattern that is broadly predictable but individually variable. In the first minutes after falling asleep, the brain moves through light sleep, the drowsy, half-present state where you might still hear sounds in the room and your muscles might twitch as they release the tension of wakefulness. This is stage 1 and stage 2 in the clinical terminology. Your heart rate slows, your body temperature drops slightly. The slow, deliberate brain waves of waking begin to be replaced by something more irregular, more inward. Then, roughly 20 to 30 minutes after sleep onset, something changes. The brain shifts into slow wave sleep. Stage 3. Deep sleep. The kind of sleep that looks on an EEG monitor like long rolling hills, the delta waves, wide and slow and deeply organized, the signature of a brain that has committed to unconsciousness in a way it doesn't during lighter sleep. Blood pressure falls, muscles relax completely. The body releases growth hormone. The brain consolidates declarative memories, moving the important things from the day into longer-term storage. This is the sleep your body needs most urgently when you're exhausted. It is also the sleep that makes waking up so painful. When you pull yourself, or are pulled, out of slow-wave sleep, your brain does not transition smoothly. It moves through what researchers call sleep inertia, a transitional state of lowered arousal and impaired performance that can last anywhere from 5 minutes to half an hour, during which your brain is technically awake, but not yet functioning at anything near its normal level. Decision-making is compromised. Reaction time is slowed. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, for judgment, for the kind of higher-order thinking that a pilot needs for an approach and landing, is among the slowest regions to come back online. This is the thing that a poorly timed nap produces, not a REM trap, not your brain confusing afternoon for midnight. Sleep inertia, the grogginess of being woken from the wrong depth of sleep at the wrong moment. REM sleep, by contrast, the stage most associated in the popular imagination with vivid dreaming, with the brain's creative and emotional processing, doesn't typically arrive until about 90 minutes after sleep onset. It is not, as the viral story suggests, the destination of a slightly too long nap. In the architecture of a normal sleep cycle, REM is the last room in the house, reached only after moving through all the others. Waking from REM can produce its own mild grogginess, the disorientation of a dream interrupted, the way the dream world sometimes clings to the first few seconds of waking. But it is not what a 30-minute nap does to you. What a 30-minute nap does to you is drop you into slow-wave sleep and then yank you back out of it. And that is genuinely unpleasant. The research is clear. A 10 to 20-minute nap produces almost no sleep inertia at all. You've stayed in light sleep, and light sleep is the sleep you can wake from cleanly, feeling refreshed rather than ambushed. A 30-minute nap crosses into slow-wave territory and comes with a recovery period on the other side. Studies have found that the sleep inertia from a 30-minute nap can impair performance for up to an hour afterward, which means that for a pilot needing to be sharp for a landing 90 minutes away, a 30-minute nap might be exactly right. For a pilot needing to be sharp immediately, it would be exactly wrong. The 26 minutes in the NASA study's context made sense not because it was a calculated ideal, but because it kept the pilots in the safe zone, just under the threshold where slow-wave sleep begins, close enough to the edge to get genuine restoration, far enough back from it to wake up functional. It was the right answer for the right question. The question just wasn't the one the headline asked. Let your body grow heavier now. Let the thinking part of you rest. Because this chapter is not about numbers or stages or the technical vocabulary of sleep science. It's about the thing underneath all of that, what it actually feels like in the brain and the body to be the kind of tired the NASA researchers were studying. There is a particular quality to the fatigue that accumulates over a long flight. It is not the fatigue of physical exertion, not the satisfying heaviness of a body that has worked hard and now needs rest. It is the fatigue of sustained vigilance, of paying careful, continuous attention to instruments and communications and checklists, and the specific demands of a complex machine traveling at 500 miles an hour through the dark. The kind of attention that feels, after hours and hours of it, not like focus, but like a weight pressing down on the mind from inside. The researchers had a more precise name for part of what they were measuring: microsleeps. A microsleep is a moment of unconsciousness lasting between half a second and several seconds, during which the brain simply stops. The EEG trace changes. The eyes may close or may remain open. A person having a microsleep sometimes looks awake. They might be sitting upright, their hands might be on the controls. But for that half second or those 3 seconds, there is nobody home. No information is being processed. No responses are being prepared. If something happens in the world that requires a response, the response will not come. In a car on a highway, a 3-second microsleep at 60 miles an hour covers 88 yards of road with nobody driving. In a cockpit during a trans-Pacific crossing, microsleeps happened most frequently in the final portion of the flight, after the long, quiet hours of the oceanic cruise, as the aircraft approached the destination and the workload began to rise again. The control group pilots, those who had not been given a rest opportunity, showed significantly more microsleeps in this critical phase than the rested pilots. Not dramatically more, not catastrophically more, but measurably, consistently more. This is what the study was actually about. Not the perfect nap length as a productivity tool, not the optimization of human performance in an office environment at 2 in the afternoon, but a very specific operational safety question about a very specific kind of fatigue in a very specific population of people doing a very specific high-stakes job. The finding mattered because it was true in the hardest to fake way. It was true on real aircraft, in real conditions, for real people doing their actual work. The 34% improvement in performance and the 54% improvement in alertness were not laboratory measurements of abstract, cognitive tasks. They were measurements of pilots' actual functional capacity during the final, most demanding, most safety-critical phase of a trans-Pacific crossing. That is what the number means. That is the weight the number carries when you put it back in its context. It is not a tip for getting more out of your afternoon. It is evidence that a small, well-timed intervention can meaningfully reduce the risk of something going terribly wrong at the end of a very long night over the Pacific Ocean. That story is less shareable. It doesn't compress into a headline as cleanly. But it is the story that kept the researchers in their work year after year. Breathe in slowly. And as you breathe out, imagine that your body is a system of clocks. Not one clock, not a single mechanism ticking away somewhere in the brainstem, but many clocks, layered and interacting, some running on a 24-hour cycle and some running on shorter rhythms, all of them influencing when you feel alert and when you feel slow, and when, regardless of how much sleep you got the night before, your brain begins to pull toward unconsciousness. Sleep researchers have known for decades that the human body has two distinct systems governing sleepiness. The first is called sleep pressure. From the moment you wake up in the morning, your brain begins producing a chemical called adenosine, a byproduct of neuronal activity, accumulating in the spaces between brain cells as the hours pass. The more adenosine accumulates, the sleepier you feel. This is why you are more tired at the end of the day than at the beginning, and why caffeine, which works by blocking adenosine receptors rather than eliminating adenosine itself, eventually loses the battle as the chemical builds to levels that no amount of coffee can fully suppress. The second system is the circadian rhythm. Your brain runs on an internal clock synchronized primarily to light, specifically to the light signals received by specialized cells in the retina that feed directly into the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a tiny cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus that functions as the master timekeeper of the body. This clock drives a cycle of alertness and sleepiness that repeats approximately every 24 hours. What the circadian rhythm does not do is run smoothly. There is a dip, a valley, a trough in the alertness cycle that occurs, for most people, in the early to mid-afternoon, somewhere between 1 and 3 o'clock, depending on the individual's chronotype and the timing of their wake-up. This dip was identified and named by the Austrian sleep researcher Alexander Borbély in 1982, and it is not caused by lunch, as is commonly assumed. It is a genuine feature of the circadian rhythm, present even in people who haven't eaten, present across cultures, present in populations that do not have a tradition of afternoon rest, present even in people who got a full night of sleep the night before. This is the point that the NASA researchers understood, and the viral version of the story misses entirely. The pilots in Rose-Kind's study were not sleep-deprived in the clinical sense when they began their flights. They had received normal rest before departure. They were not running on empty, but the combination of the circadian trough, the accumulated sleep pressure of many alert hours, the monotony of the cruise phase, and the subtle physiological effects of the cockpit environment produced the fatigue that the EEG sensors detected. The nap worked not because the pilots were dramatically exhausted. It worked because a brief period of light sleep cleared adenosine, sleep pressure, from the brain's receptors more efficiently than any other intervention available in that cockpit Not coffee, not conversation, not the cold water in the face remedy that flight crews used informally and that had never been tested with sensors on their scalps. Sleep itself. Just sleep in a small, careful dose. This is why the finding generalized beyond aviation. The afternoon dip is universal. The adenosine mechanism is universal. The restoration that light sleep provides is available to any brain that will accept it. And the window before slow-wave sleep arrives, the 20 to 25 minutes of light sleep, during which you can restore alertness without triggering the grogginess of being pulled from depth. That window is also universal. The 26 minutes is a photograph of that window, taken in a specific place, under specific conditions, with a specific group of people. But the window is real, and it is yours, every afternoon, whether you use it or not. The part of the viral story that is perhaps most quietly misleading is the one about universality. 26 minutes, the headline implies, is the number for everyone. A rule as fixed as any other rule of biology, the same for a 20-year-old flight student as for a 60-year-old captain, the same for a night shift worker as for a 9-to-5 commuter, the same regardless of how much sleep you got last week or how much adenosine your particular brain has accumulated by 2 in the afternoon. This is not how sleep works. The threshold at which slow-wave sleep begins varies with sleep debt. If you are significantly sleep-deprived, if you've been shortchanging yourself for days or weeks, the way many people do, the way shift workers chronically do, the way the pilots in Rosekind's study occasionally did, after crossing multiple time zones, your brain will reach slow-wave sleep faster than the standard 20 to 30-minute estimate. It is more urgently seeking the deepest kind of restoration. It will not wait as long before going looking for it. This means that for a sleep-deprived person, a 26-minute nap might carry real risk of sleep inertia on the other end, that the brain, in its urgent search for recovery, will have crossed the threshold sooner than expected and be mid-slow wave when the alarm sounds. It also varies with age. Older adults typically reach slow-wave sleep more slowly and spend less time in it. The sleep architecture of a 60-year-old is not the same as the sleep architecture of a 30-year-old. The window is in a slightly different place. It varies with chronotype. The individual variation in the timing of the circadian rhythm that makes some people genuinely feel most alert in the early morning and others most alive in the late evening. The afternoon dip falls at different clock times for people with different chronotypes. The optimal nap window shifts accordingly, and it varies more practically with what comes next. A pilot with 90 minutes until descent is in a different situation from an office worker with 15 minutes before a meeting. The appropriate nap length, and whether a nap is appropriate at all, depends on what the nap is for and what it has to leave room for. The NASA study was, in this sense, exquisitely context-specific. Rosekind's team knew exactly what their pilots needed. They needed to be functional within a defined time window for a specific task, in a specific operational environment. The 40-minute rest opportunity was designed to fit within the cruise phase of the flight. The 26 minutes of average sleep was the natural result of that design, meeting the realities of human sleep biology. It was not a prescription, it was an observation. The difference between those two things is, in science, everything. A prescription says, do this, and this will happen for you, regardless of context. An observation says, in this situation with these people under these conditions, this happened, and here is what we learned about why. What we learned about why is the part that generalizes. The mechanisms, adenosine clearance, sleep inertia, the slow wave threshold, the circadian dip, those are real and applicable. The number is a frame around one particular moment in which those mechanisms played out. Your number might be 20 minutes, it might be 15, it might be, if you're running a significant sleep debt, as few as 10, enough to clear some adenosine from the receptors, not enough to let the brain start falling toward depth. The principle is real, the prescription is a simplification. And simplifications, as any good scientist will tell you, are only useful until they start to mislead. Let your thoughts become very gentle now. Let them drift, unhurried, the way thoughts do when sleep is close. Because this part of the story is about consequence, about what happens when research done quietly and carefully in a small field at a federal agency eventually makes its way into the world and changes things. Rosekind's 1995 study was not immediately celebrated. It was published in the Journal of Sleep Research, which is not a publication that generates a great deal of media attention, and the findings it described, while significant within the aviation safety community, were not the kind of thing that became news. What it did do was give researchers, safety advocates, and eventually regulators something they had previously lacked: hard evidence, collected in operational conditions, that planned cockpit rest improved measurable safety outcomes. The aviation safety community, which tends to move carefully and at its own pace, began to incorporate the findings into its thinking about fatigue management. The Federal Aviation Administration, which had long maintained rules about flight time and rest periods based on broad operational limits rather than sleep physiology, began to engage more seriously with the growing body of research about what fatigue actually did to pilots and what interventions actually helped. It took a long time. It took more studies, more advocacy, more incidents in which fatigue was identified as a contributing factor, more arguments between regulators and airlines about the costs of more conservative rules. The process of converting science into policy is always longer and messier than the science itself, but the direction of travel was set. In 2012, the FAA issued new flight and duty time rules that incorporated, for the first time, a more systematic understanding of sleep science. The rules acknowledged the circadian rhythm. They accounted for time zone crossing and the way it disrupted the body's internal clock. They created more nuanced requirements around rest periods. Other countries, through their own regulatory bodies and through the international aviation standards maintained by ICAO, made similar changes on similar timelines. Rosekind himself went on to serve on the National Transportation Safety Board, the independent agency that investigates aviation accidents, and later became the administrator of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, where he brought the same research-backed perspective on fatigue to the question of drowsy driving. The same science, different vehicle, same human brain. The military, which had its own parallel history of research on sleep and performance in operational settings, incorporated fatigue management protocols that drew on the same underlying science. Elite military units, where the consequences of degraded performance are as severe as they are in commercial aviation, developed formal napping policies. The stigma, the cultural association between napping and laziness, between needing rest and lacking toughness, began slowly to give way in the face of evidence that refusing to rest was not a sign of strength, but a form of self-sabotage. Sports science arrived at similar conclusions through its own route. Elite athletic programs began to study recovery with the same seriousness they studied training. Sleep rooms appeared in team facilities. The afternoon nap became not a guilty pleasure, but a scheduled intervention, as deliberately structured as a weight session or a film review. The 26 minutes went viral years after all of this had already happened, in a form that had shed most of the context that made it meaningful. But the underlying science and the changes it produced in aviation, in the military, in sports, in medicine, those were real. Those are the 26 minutes doing their actual work in the world. This is the quietest chapter, the one that belongs to the edge of sleep. Because the most interesting truth in the whole story of the NASA nap study is not about numbers or regulations or how a finding gets distorted as it travels through the internet. It's about what actually happens inside a human brain in the minutes between waking and the slow wave threshold. The window that Rose-Kind's pilots were navigating, even if they didn't think of it that way. In the first minutes after you close your eyes and let go of the effort of being awake, the brain begins a transition that has been underway your entire life, every time you have ever slept, but that most of us have never observed from the inside with any attention. The default mode network, the brain's background processing system, the one that runs when you're not actively focused on a task, becomes more active as external attention dims. This is why, in the minutes before sleep, thoughts sometimes become more associative, more dreamlike, following their own logic rather than the logic of waking intention. A thought about tomorrow's meeting connects, for no apparent reason, to a memory of a beach from childhood, which connects to something someone said years ago, which connects to nothing in particular, and then the connection itself loosens, and there is just the thought floating, unattached. This is stage 1 sleep, or the border of it. Not quite sleep, not quite waking. The place where the body begins to slow and the mind begins to travel. In stage 2, the EEG begins to show something called sleep spindles, brief bursts of oscillatory brain activity lasting about half a second each, appearing regularly every few seconds. The sleep spindle is one of the most interesting things a sleeping brain does. Researchers believe it plays a role in memory consolidation, in the process of deciding which things from the day's experience are worth moving into longer-term storage and which can be released. People with more sleep spindles in their stage 2 sleep tend to perform better on memory tasks afterward. The brain, even in light sleep, is not resting in any simple sense. It is working. Not the anxious, directed work of waking attention, but a different kind of work, slower, more internal, more concerned with organization and integration than with the new demands arriving from the external world, and at the same time adenosine is being cleared. The sleep pressure that has been building since morning, the chemical accumulation of all those hours of wakefulness, begins to dissipate as the sleep systems come online. Not completely, not after 25 minutes of light sleep, but meaningfully. Enough that the brain, when it returns to waking, finds its receptors a little less burdened, its systems a little more available for the work of alertness. This is what the pilots in Rosekind's study were getting. Not just a rest, not just a break from the monotony of the cockpit, a genuine neurological intervention, a brief period of light sleep, during which the brain did its quiet maintenance work, cleared some of what had accumulated, and prepared itself more effectively for what was coming. The 34% improvement in performance was the downstream result of that maintenance. The brain, given a window, used it well. It always does. Let your body grow very heavy now. Let the thoughts become slower. Let them lose their edges, their beginnings and endings, and become more like impressions, more like the feeling of something than the content of it. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean tonight, there is an aircraft, a long-haul flight, hours into its crossing, somewhere in the middle of the ocean dark, where there are no lights below, and the stars above are extraordinary, and the autopilot holds the plane on its programmed course with quiet, tireless precision. On the flight deck, there are two pilots. One of them is awake, attending to the instruments with the patient, careful attention of someone who has learned over many years of flying that attention is a form of care. The other is resting, reclined slightly, eyes closed, breathing slowed, EEG sensors probably not attached to his scalp, because this is a regular commercial flight and not a research study, but his brain doing, in the absence of measurement, everything that Rosekind's instruments once recorded. Sleep spindles flickering through stage 2, adenosine clearing slowly from the receptors, the default mode network doing its quiet associative work, the body's temperature dropping a fraction, the heart rate settling. In 25 minutes, or 26, or maybe 22, however long his particular brain, with its particular history of sleep and wakefulness and circadian timing, takes to find what it needs in the light sleep zone, he will wake. And the part of his brain responsible for approach and landing, for the final calculations and communications and decisions of a trans-Pacific crossing, will be measurably more available than it would have been without those minutes. Not because of a number on a productivity blog, because a small team of researchers spent years studying the physiology of tired pilots on real aircraft over a real ocean, and found that the thing that helped, the simple, ancient, no technology required thing, was exactly what it has always been: sleep, in the right measure, at the right time. The viral number is wrong about its own story, but the thing the story is pointing toward, the real thing, the thing with the science behind it and the safety record and the pilots who landed better and the researchers who spent their careers in a quiet corner of human factors research making the case for it, that thing is true. Your brain is doing it right now, moving through the stages, clearing what has accumulated, doing the quiet, invisible, essential work that makes tomorrow possible. There is nothing you need to do, no number to remember, no window to calculate, just the brain doing what it has always known how to do, and the body letting it and the dark around you full and safe and patient. Let your thoughts go where they want to go. Let the connections loosen. Let the edges of things soften. Somewhere over the ocean, a pilot is resting, and you can rest too. The night is doing its work. Let it. Good night.